1. So today we're going to be looking at the archaeology of the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West, part 2. We've gone so far west, we're actually in Britain. So that's what we're doing today. I did think about the title, and I thought, right, is this about the collapse of the Roman world in Britain, or is this about identifying how Roman civilization actually continued in Britain? And I think it's a bit of both, actually. So this site is going to be familiar to some of you, but with the law changing, you won't be able to get access to this site. This is the Roman villa at Llantwit Major, and the law I'm referring to is the new law about trespass being classed as a criminal offence and so on. So this is actually off the footpath. If you want to go and see the Roman villa at Llantwit Major, I'll do it now before the law change. So this villa itself was discovered, I believe, not in 1886, where the records tell us. I believe this was discovered in 1790 by Iolo Ganog, otherwise known as Edward Williams. And Edward Williams described a site near Llanmaes as being a platform with nice cut stones, and he referred to it as a Roman temple. And nothing was heard about that from that point onwards. And lo and behold, an archaeologist wanders across the field, a guy known as John Story, looking for mushrooms in his description, and suddenly he stumbles across a Roman villa. In fact, that's the same story that we find with one or two others of John Story's discoveries of archaeological sites across the region. But this site itself, how this site was found and what this site means and everything that was found there is another lecture altogether. What we're talking about is the very late period of Roman civilization in Britain, from roughly around 350 all the way to 476, when the Roman Empire finally collapsed in the West with the last emperor known as Romulus. It's quite ironic that the empire starts off in 753 BC with Romulus and it ends with Romulus. But anyway, but this site itself has got an interesting sinister side to it. And that interesting sinister side to it, that some of you may already be aware, is the relationship that this site actually has with the finding of a number of bodies discovered in the 1880s. And these bodies were actually found in this room. If you want to get an idea of what this site looked like, that is part of the building up there. It comes in there, and then we've got more of the building running along there, all the way through, all the way back to about there, and then we have these buildings here, something like that, and running all the way to the back, and like this, and running all the way through, and that is the Roman villa. And there's a bit of a wall at the back. And there were some other buildings associated with it as well. So X marks the spot, and this itself is what really interests me, because John Story describes over 30 bodies being discovered in a room, and these bodies are found decapitated on top of a mosaic. And also they find a horse that also looks like it's been decapitated as well. Also inside this building. And they do find other bodies as well that have been deliberately buried, but these bodies are all disarticulated, their heads have been cut off, and the immediate thing that was presumed, now this is really important to the lecture today, the immediate thing that was presumed is that these bodies, I think the number's about 33, these bodies represent the male population related to this Roman villa. Nobody questioned that. They said, yes, that's fact. If you think about it, 33 men and probably their wives and their sisters and their children and all the rest of it, that might represent about 60 to 70 people living at this site, which is definitely not possible, because one thing that Roman villas were in fact, yeah, they didn't have thousands of people living at them, hundreds of people. These were places that people liked to live. So nobody questioned the figures. They said definitely these are people that related to this site. The wives and the children were taken away by raiders sometime between 350 and 400, and that was it. Nobody questioned it. That was fact. That was gospel. Except when they started doing strontium analysis on the remains, and they started working out some other bits and pieces to do with the remains, they found out that the individuals here weren't local at all. They were from up north. And these represented not the people that lived at the site, but represented the raiders that come into the area. And overnight, that paints a completely different picture of that period between the late 300s into the 400s, that period of Arthur. In other words, if raiders come into these sites, it was as likely that they're going to be killed by the local inhabitants as the local inhabitants are going to be killed by them. So that, again, changes the scene. In fact, these people weren't prey to raiders and people taking what they had. These people were people that defended the landscape against these raiders. They weren't a walk in the park. So what we've done is not rewrite history. We've actually presented history for the way it's meant to be presented. The other reason why we mention this is one of the great legacies of Rome, Christianity. Christianity is something that fell nicely into the history of Llantwit Major, but not if you lived there 5 years ago. I remember giving a walk, it was around 2 years ago, and we had this woman on this walk. And I made the statement that Christianity in Llantwit Major was actually founded by the Romans themselves. It wasn't a bunch of fictitious saints coming over with Saint Augustine in the 500s. These were actually genuine, real Christians that lived within this area in the later period of Rome, in the Vale of Glamorgan. And this woman was absolutely horrified by this statement. She said, "I am a Christian. Our Christian didn't begin as being a cult." And she really made a fool of herself. And unbeknown to her, I think a couple of weeks later, there was a talk at to the local history society. And this very eminent guy who was speaking to the local history society reiterated what I said, that Christianity came to this area with the Romans. It stayed as the chief religion in the area, and it didn't go away. And one of the things to be said about this villa is that it's very much to do with the legends associated with this site. I'm very suspicious of lots of the saints' names throughout the area. The likes of Caddock, the likes of Barrack, the likes of Govan, all those saints. There are carvings associated with Ilkdid, but they're later carvings. And even with the name Ilkdid, it may have been a fictitious invention. And there are lots of place names associated with Ilkdid. But I'm not sure that lots of these saints are actually bona fide. But that is, again, another lecture. That's into the Christian period. But I'm looking at this site, and I'm seeing the patters of history, the pitter-patters of history. And I'm seeing the pitter-patters of history. The archaeologist John Story, and I've mentioned this many times, not John Story, the archaeologist Nash Williams, when he was excavating in Llantwit Major, 1936, 1937, when he was excavating at Llantwit Major, I've told you this story many times before. A group of officials came down from London in his own log, and they said, "You've got to stop work." At that time, he was actually finding Roman remains by the church. And he was told that you cannot do any more work here. And that adds to the history. It's almost as if nobody wants to think that Roman Christianity created the monasteries and everything within this landscape. It's almost as if we've got to have an invented history of Caddock and Doven and Barrack and so on. And one of the things that I do say is you've got to look at the archaeological evidence. And the archaeological evidence bears out much of what I'm saying. This site itself what we do find is a number of bodies. I think that the total is 6, but there's lots of other excavations. About six bodies have actually been deliberately buried here, and the DNA relates to the local population, and they've been deliberately buried. No signs that they've ever been killed, like the unfortunate people that were herded into this into the room at this site directly. The bodies were found within this room that you're looking at, with a wonderful mosaic on the floor. So very different people, and a wonderful, a piece of carving that we would associate with Roman archaeology across our land. You know, it's a great backdrop to understanding our history. But I could be forgiven for falling into the Norman trap. You know, I give the Romans a great deal of credit for establishing things across this landscape. But when I use the word Roman is actually a tag name for all those that lived in Britain in the Roman period. It's very likely that there wasn't a single person of Roman blood living in the Vale of Glamorgan. All of these people were native people. All of these people found their origins in the Iron Age. All of these people found their DNA and everything else going back thousands of years within the local landscape. The word Roman is the name given to the population. It's everyone became a Roman citizen after the edict of Caracalla in the year 211. And those who were to be enshrined in the idea of Christianity within the local area were in fact native people, and that must be remembered. People carving this statue were actually local people. People living in the Roman villa at Llantwit Major were local people. So we're all familiar with this, and it's not. The irony isn't lost on me in the sense that, you know, we're looking at a local site. You guys are local, but I have actually done this lecture 4 times this week. It happens to be that we've got some nice information about the population in that late Roman period, and the information's growing. In fact, I'm going to chuck this in here. I haven't checked this in the other lectures, but what we do have is that the information about the Roman period in the area is actually growing, because what we do find, and I'm going to point to it, is by here. I visited 2 years ago 2 really well built Roman corn drying kilns, really nicely built Roman corn drying kilns. Unfortunately, you guys weren't allowed to visit it. I was investigated for making these findings public. The video I put online had to be taken off. But that is more sets of Roman remains in the area. So the idea, looking into the evidence from the Roman period for the Llantwit Major area, is not just residing at the Roman villa anymore. It's spreading. And maybe one day the truth can actually come out. So what we're seeing here, just a brief image. I didn't want to show these clearly. That's deliberate. This isn't a lecture about Celtic. God, I've finally said it. Celtic carved stones, native Cymru carved stones. This is not a lecture about that. But the fact of the matter is, these stones there bear out early Christianity. The reason why there's lots of carved stones within the local area, because the way it develops is because you've got a very early Christian community there. What I'm going to actually show you now is something that agrees with me and completely disagrees at the same time, which I like. It's a statement, and you can all see this statement. Now, this ties in. Some of this is hearsay, some of this is based on what I've said, and some of this completely disagrees with what I said. So, First College of Theodosius. In 380 AD, the Roman Emperor Theodosius proclaimed Christianity to be the only legitimate religion of the Roman Empire. Fact. Ending support for any other religions and customs. Fact. A college honoring him was established at the site Llantwit Major, in the year 395 now. I would agree with that. It may be seen as a legendary footnote, but 3 years ago, nobody would be saying that. Theodosius founded the college himself personally. Well, I think that's really unlikely, but the sense of a sense of a Roman Christian community is borne out in the archaeology that was discovered by Nash Williams in the 1930s, and the archaeology that we're excavating the Roman villa at KARL-JAMES and the other sites as well. Those Roman corn drying kilns ain't lying, right? They're there, they existed. I've got video footage of it. And that was only 2 years ago. The college was the earliest school, former or extant, in the whole of Great Britain. Now, you know, that's quite a statement. But then again, it tells you of the importance of Llantwit Major in this period. And has even been called the oldest college in the world. Okay. That's good. It was founded during the twilight of the Roman occupation of Britain, tick. There was no withdrawal of the Roman legions, and we'll talk about that into this as well. And Britain was raided by the Irish, Scots and Picts and sacked villages and monasteries. Well, in the case of the Roman villa at Llantwit Major, they didn't have much success. Those were the ones who died and carried off the inhabitants as slaves. Again, in the local area, that's absolute nonsense because the archaeological evidence tells us something completely different. Now, this is interesting. The College of Theodosius was reputedly burnt to the ground by Irish pirates in 446 AD and was abandoned. Well, I wouldn't go with that. If you've got a Christian community here, fact. That's fact. You've also got a lot of evidence, and I believe that community continued. Another fact is that the church at Llantwit Major of Ilklid is not the original church. There was the monastic remains and all the rest of it dominate the south side of the area, just below the church at Llantwit Major. So again, we're going to go somewhere completely different. This was never a lecture about Llantwit Major today, and we now can put it behind us. So now we're going to be looking at a site known as Wroxeter. And sorry, this sounds very bombastic today, but I'm in that type of mood. So we're looking at a site known as Viraconian Wroxeter near Shrewsbury. And those that have been to this site will be very aware of the site's importance. And Pam, I'm going to mute your thingy. There was some bells ringing in Pam's way. I don't know why. So, Viraconium, Wroxeter. Again, this is the late Roman period. Wroxeter itself is a fine site. Now, two things that we do know about Wroxeter is that it's a city with some really nice standing remains even to this day. The other thing about Viraconium, it may have been the heart of the Mercian kingdom as Roman civilization had eventually collapsed in Britain by 476. But by all the evidence that I'm finding, most of Viraconium Wroxeter had been abandoned by that point anyway. So it may have just been a spiritual center with a church or something, and everything else went into ruins. So the area of the city that we're going to actually look at is actually this building, known as the workhouse. And on this side, what you do find is actually the remains of a length of Roman columns at the site. And what they have done, which I think is extremely bizarre, they've actually reconstructed a Roman townhouse directly in the center of where the Roman Forum is. But they built it there because I think, I don't know what I think. But anyway, let's look at this site. Do you know, that's the first time I've ever said I don't know what I think. My God, I must be changed. Just because I know everything, that's quite a statement. Right, so this is quite a building. And it's quite a building. It was known as the workhouse up until about the 1700s. A really tall standing wall. Some of the tallest sets of Roman remains left anywhere in Britain. We do have the Roman remains at Durham. You know, we've got buildings associated with bathhouse that built at Durham, about 2-3 meters tall, right? But this is a structure that vaults the landscape. There is actually a structure very similar to this in the heart of Rata Rata, which is Leicester. This wall itself is really intriguing. And it tells us of the changes that we were seeing in later Roman Britain. And the changes that we were seeing in later Roman Britain was that the people were abandoning the Roman landscape. The local people were abandoning the landscape. That's really key. Connections with Rome were slowly falling apart. The dates that you see, for example, date 410, it said that there's a note, the pleas of the British to the Roman Emperor Honorius at Ravenna in 410. I don't actually think that that's a genuine a genuine set of correspondence. I believe from all the evidence that we see that Roman civilization, with or without Rome, continued. It's very likely that some of the last vestiges of the Western Roman world were snuffed out in Roman Britain before the 500s turn up. This site, again, back to this site. This is not the only bathhouse that we actually look at. This site itself tell us of this really slow, agonizing decline. So you're talking about 415, 420, all the way to 476. And the strangest thing is, this is linked to lots of the other lectures that we've done. And in some of the other lectures that we've done, I've mentioned abandonment. I've mentioned the Amazon people abandoned their cities and went somewhere else, or went back to the way they were. The Bedouins at Petra, the Bedouins, the Nabateans, the Bedouins, they abandoned their city at Petra and went back to being Bedouins. I've come up with the equation 1 minus 2 equals 1. So basically, one kind of civilization leading to another kind of civilization, going back to that original kind of civilization. I'm loath to use the words lower civilization, advanced, and lower civilization, because what are we to say what the hallmarks of an advanced civilization are? The local people seemingly turn their back on these cities, and it's not to do with the fact that they want to abandon their Roman identity, because how can that be so? They're not abandoning their Roman identity. They've been under the heel of Rome for 400 years. They keep using Latin. In fact, the official state language of Britain is still Latin. Some of our legal documents are still in Latin. You also look at Christianity, that's still with us. The local people kept to Christianity in most places. And Christianity is still with us today. So, you know, you've got other areas as well that remain from Rome, such as the art, such as the way they organize the landscape, such as how people interacted and so on. So all these things remain with us as legacies of ancient Rome. But naturally, these are local people. These are local people living and breathing. And for the sake of argument, it's almost as if the Romans used the local people as much as the local people used the Romans. It was a laissez-faire agreement. It was a sense of Pax Romana. You sleep with me, I sleep with you, that type of scenario. But neither of you are enjoying it. So when one of you leaves, you're quite happy to get on with your life, and the other one goes back to Rome. So that's sort of a bit of an analogy there. So what we're looking at is this wonderful set of remains, and this is a bathhouse suite. So you've got the vaulted buildings here associated with the bathhouse. You have a hypercore system. You have this great wall. You have a set of Roman columns leading into some kind of a forum here. And what the archaeologists have done is reconstruct a Roman building directly on top of the forum. Again, I think that's very bizarre. Again, this is all telling us the late Roman period, and you must look at these the abandonment as being extremely more complicated than the abandonment of, say, for example, an Amazonian city? And the answer comes out quite clearly. I'm going to use Gough. Gough's got his many children and his wonderful family and so on, and he's living in a place like this. But the children all leave home, and it's just Gough and his partner, and that's all that's left. And they think, right, we're in this city. It's the late Roman period. Can we maintain this building? And the answer is no. Is food coming into the city 410, 420? The answer is no. So the best place to do and the best place to go is to what you know. And what you know is the countryside. Being somebody that's lived within this landscape for 300-400 years as a family, you would have once been connected with the landscape. You still had land in the countryside. So that's where you're going to move. You're going to abandon the cities. And this is very much what we're talking about. Sorry to get very personal there, Gough, but I wanted to use that as an analogy for this type of landscape. So what we do see is with lots of these cities, we really see these really impressive walls. Like Llantwit, we see really impressive walls at Silchester. We see bits of walls surviving at the likes of St. Albans, Verulamium, Silchester, Caliva Atrabatum. I had to put that in there. So we got these bits of walls standing. The walls may stand, but the buildings within don't. They just decay and fall apart, and they just go with a sense of abandonment, like we do see at Llantwit. And this is what we see today, these bits of remains, and that's where the road would have been. But this is rather interesting to me as well. 2 points. That and that has something in common. It's called the veranda. Local people didn't need verandas after the Roman period. As the Roman worlds collapsed, and they didn't need verandas. The whole point of the veranda, the whole point of the columns, and the whole point of having a roof there is to stop you being baked by the sun. Well, we don't get much sun in Britain. And why do you need a veranda to protect yourself against the sun? You can use a little bit of a veranda to protect yourself against the rain, but, you know, that's the way it is. And so the sense of having colonnaded streets and colonnaded verandaed buildings is no longer required, because back then in the Roman world, it was part of Roman civilization. It was part of the Pax Romana. You know, you are like me as I am like you, that type of idea. But as the Roman world starts to decay, your relationship starts to go away. And then as Rome goes away completely, things start to change quite dramatically. This is that structure. It's a really impressive building. Sorry, and in many ways, when you look at this building, you see that it's still standing to an amazing height. And just a little bit of archaeological detail. What you can see is the string courses going through it of brick. And what you would do, you would have 1.5 meters, a little bit more of stone, a string course, another 1.5 meters, string course, 1 meter, string course, 1 meter. So you get an idea that this structure is towering up to 20 meters in height. One of the tallest standing structures to be seen anywhere in the landscape, maybe even poking out from the walls that actually surrounded Verulamium as well. So this is a great structure. And there's all signs that as this landscape's being abandoned, this whole structure was allowed to collapse and decay into the state where it is today. Lots of material was taken from Wroxeter, Verulamium, to be used in the construction of the landscape around. What we do see is at the local church at Wroxeter, you've got 2 Roman columns in the porch at the church. So they've taken material from here. So large tracts of Verulamium have not been actually excavated either. And where you've got this building on top, this area hasn't been excavated either. So there's so much we can actually learn. You know, one thing I want to do when we've got our trip to York, I know most of you won't be going, but those that do go, one of the things I want to do is have one group of people going into the museums and one group of people with me wandering around the city, i.e. looking at the Roman walls, looking at all those things that we always miss when we go to a place like York, because I do like to see Roman masonry. It gives me a bit of a kick. And this is another location that we've got really good Roman masonry standing. Kathy's been with me to this site. It's known as Caistor St. Edmunds. And Caistor St. Edmunds is a site that was tossed off in the realm of later Roman Britain and completely abandoned, carte blanche. Nothing was placed there since, except for a little church by here. And obviously you've got the modern road running. There's nothing there at all. And we know that this site has not really been used or occupied since, because we can actually see the grid pattern. There you go. And that grid pattern going all the way through. I'll just complete that little bit. There's more there as well. And what we've got that grid pattern, and each of these are known as insula. And these insula themselves are actually the blocks where you would have what's going on. So it's very likely that you would have had the forum there, and you would have had the bathhouse there, and you would have had some shops along here, and you'd have had some townhouses over here and all the rest of it. Interesting enough, Caistor St. Edmunds was actually constructed for the local people. It wasn't actually constructed for millions of Romans coming over from the continent. This was actually constructed for local people. This is key to what we're talking about. And whilst they're in the Roman world, whilst the Roman world's operational, 420, 430, and thereabouts still, whilst it's still operational, people live here. They use the Roman economy. They trade with the Romans. They trade alongside the Romans. They use the coin of the day. And actually, one other thing as well is, one great legacy of Rome is actually coinage. If you want to forget about everything else of legacies, coinage, because before the Romans came to Britain, there were few tribes actually using coins. And if they were using coins, they were very unlikely using them for trade. This site itself, and I'll show you where this is. I'm a bit amiss to actually show you where this is. So we'll show you this. There it is, near Norwich, Caistor St. Edmunds, or Castor St. Edmunds. So there you go. And one of the legacies is actually is coins, because what we do see is the coin economy continues after the Roman period. Even though cities are abandoned, the coin economy continues. So that's really important to get that. But you can actually see the really interesting walls that still stand around the outside. You know, I used to say, you know, when I used to believe the following. I used to say that when the Anglo-Saxons, Hengist and Horsa and all that nonsense, there used to be bands of Anglo-Saxons wandering across the countryside, and when they used to come to these cities, they used to say, "Oh no, we don't want to go to those cities because people have died in there and they're full of plague." Well, the readjustment is there weren't big invasions of Anglo-Saxons, and even if there were small groups of Anglo-Saxons coming over, they probably looked upon this site as the local people looked upon this site. They probably thought, we're not going there. It's full of decay. You know, you probably wouldn't be able to get through the streets either, because the columns have collapsed on the road and all the rest of it have been completely inaccessible, and you'd have just abandoned it, right? Because before the Romans, this type of civilization was unfamiliar. After the Romans, it became unfamiliar, and to those new people coming over, it was also unfamiliar. So why would you have any intercourse with it? You know, you're gonna stay away from it. This is what archaeology is telling us. And there's Kathy at the back there, going up with a blue shirt on, going up the steps into the site at Caistor St. Edmunds. And the next site that we're going to look at is Caliva Atrebatum. I love Caliva Atrebatum because of the name. Anyway, so Caliva Atrebatum itself is otherwise known as Silchester, near Reading. And it's a site that's been excavated extensively by universities over the years. It's a very intriguing site. And why is it intriguing? I will tell you. Now, it's intriguing because before the Romans came to Britain, this had links to the south. They were developing a city towards the south. And this city itself, known as Nepidium, would have become a proper functioning city 200 years after 43 AD if the Romans hadn't invaded. So what we're saying is that we would have had cities with or without the Romans. Because of trade with Europe and all the rest of it, we would have started building cities similar to Roman cities, but not laid out in the way Roman cities were actually laid out. They would have been very different, but they would have nevertheless been cities. Now, this is very interesting. So they were already, the local people were already developing something special at Caliva Atrobatum before the Romans got here. And that's something that needs to be remembered. The sense of Britishness would have enshrined to be a city. Now, then you've got the Romans coming over, and then history goes the way the Romans want history to go. And what the Romans do, they build a city with roads going to all these corners of Britain. And this is why the walls are built like that, because each of the gateways it works quite well, actually. And there you go. So there were all these gateways leading out of Caliva Atrobatum, and these had roadways going all the way across Roman Britain. And the strangest thing with Caliva Atrobatum, Silchester, now this is the strangest thing altogether. When Roman civilization started to collapse, by about 430, the city had been completely abandoned. Completely abandoned. And I sit back and think, I don't understand. And the reason why I don't understand is that this was being developed as a city even before the Romans made it a city. Why did the local people turn their backs on it? And if any of this is today is a mystery, that's one of the mysteries. It's almost as if they thought, actually, this might be the answer, but I'm not sure. Actually, cities are not what we need at this present moment. When we had the pandemic, and some would say it's still with us, so I accept that. In lockdown, we had cities across Britain that were ghost towns, absolute ghost towns. And if the supermarkets hadn't got themselves sorted out, we were 2 weeks away from running out of food. Now, if you use those analogies, the only way you can keep a city going is it's being supplied with food. And if people in the countryside are quite happy with what they've got and they're not taking food into the cities are abandoned and become ghost towns. A city is not the best place to be in when things are changing. When networks start to collapse, cities are not the best places to be. When roads and waterways are no longer maintained, you stay away from the cities. You live in the countryside. Now, you could argue that cities themselves are the best place to be with other people if you want to defend yourself. You can't really defend yourself if you don't have sustenance. The best place to be is out in the countryside. And some archaeologists are coming around to what I'm about to say as well, that there weren't all these bloody battles and fighting after the Roman civilization collapsed in Britain. We don't find the archaeological evidence. And if there were bands of people fighting, they were bands of people, and that was it. 10, 20 people on one side and 10, 20 people on another, and that was it. That's what we're talking about, classed as a battle, you know, skirmishes. There weren't these great levels of fighting. We do have signs that later on there are great battles and so on, but even when we're talking about the word great battles, these are only involving hundreds of people. By modern standards, again, they're little skirmishes. So, you know, cities are not really being required as the Roman world starts to decay. And we had learned something from the Romans. Again, we took from the Romans as much as they took from us. We worked out the cities were not the best place to be at that present moment in time. And one great sign of the abandonment of Calivra Atrabatum is looking at how well preserved the archaeology is. Now look at this black and white image of a Roman mosaic. And I like this Roman mosaic for a number of different reasons. One, it's styled very similarly to the style of the mosaic at Llantwit Major. You saw at the mosaic at Llantwit Major, the swastika. You also saw something known as the galosh pattern. Now, this mosaic, like the one at Llantwit Major, was being created by a group of craftsmen that were based at Carinion, Cirencester, south of Gloucester, that we will actually look at. And they were going around the country creating these mosaics. And these were local people. And I think it's rather interesting that you could think that the people or the ancestors of the people who created the one here then created the one at Llantwit Major. So what you've got an interchange of links and connection across Britain in the Roman period, but connecting local people in the sense of Roman civilization. And I think that's another thing that we may have learned from the Roman world. As much as the Romans took from us, let's talk about the things that we took from the Roman world, other than the obvious Christianity and coinage. Connectivity, with the sense of knowledge of other people in Britain, in the post-Roman period, in the sub-Roman period, people are actually starting to understand that there are people up north and they've got iron, and there are people in the West Country with tin. Even though these things were known about, they didn't actually know these people. Because people are traveling around in the Roman world and they're trading, things are safe and things are easy. People are aware of others. So I think one thing that we learned was connectivity. And there's a lot that we can still understand with the word connectivity. You know, in a way, we are doing it as we do via Zoom today, online. We've got that sense of connectivity. You know, if we were all living alone in our homes and we had no internet, we wouldn't have this class today. But this, in a way, is something of the connectivity that we see given to us by the Roman civilization in Britain. And when you think about it, and this is key to where I want to go next. I've mentioned it, but I need to be a bit more firmer. This is a gateway, a reconstruction of a gateway going into Calivra Atrabatum. I would argue it wouldn't be as grand as this, but it's still a really impressive gateway. Now, the big question is, going back to what I've said already and dismissed it, if you've got these really strong, powerful walls, and you've got massive people coming over invading, and they're raping and pillaging and killing you and all the rest of it, right? Why aren't you using these defensive walls? Even if there's no water and food in them, why aren't you using them? And the answer is quite clear. There aren't mass invasions. There aren't mass battles. There isn't this mass looting that historians mention. And the other point as well is, I'm going to be quite clear with this. If in this period, you know, the 450s, 500s, if people are always being killed, how are we here today? How are we the descendants of these people? The answer is that this was not a landscape of great calamity. This was a landscape of farmers that had abandoned the cities. This is a landscape of those people that have been here for thousands of years, going back to what they know. Do you know what? Keith, can I pick on you a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you ever have a situation when you were a teenager that you thought, I'm going to leave the family home, I'm going to go out there, and suddenly things went wrong and you went back to your parents?
No.
Okay, well, that happened.
I did.
Oh, Jane. What, can you tell me about that experience? Not the detail, but the peripheral on the surface. What happened?
Yeah, well, going back was necessary, but it wasn't much fun because obviously I went back with my tail between my legs.
That's enough. Yeah, no, carry on. Go on. You're going to say more.
No, that's it, really. That's it. I left because I wanted to my independence and I wasn't getting on with my parents and so on and so on, but couldn't make it work. So back I went.
Do you know what? That's a great analogy of where we are, because in a way, what you've done, you've been away, like me. I was away from my parents for 15 years. With a tail between my legs, exactly like you. Things didn't work out. I had to leave again, right? But anyway, right? You and me, Jane, very much alike there. So, but the point is, if you look at this, before the Romans, before AD 43, local population, they have Roman civilization. Things are wonderful, like any relationship or anything else like that. Okay, and then what happens is that things start to go wrong towards the end of the relationship. Things start to go wrong. For example, in later Roman Britain, there's not as much trade. In later Roman Britain, there's not as much maintenance of the roads. And people start to think this isn't for them anymore. And they start to move into the countryside. But the countryside that they see is not the countryside that they left. The countryside that they left is not managed the way it used to be. There are trees growing where your old family home used to be 400 years ago. You have to really work hard. And Jane, isn't that what happens when you've got to go back to your parents? You've got to work really hard. Yes.
In my case,
go on.
In my case, my parents moved away from me. They left the house to me and my brother, and they retired down to Devon.
I don't think that's what we're talking about, but you know, what I'm trying to say is that you've had your own way of things. You have another way of things. It's not really working at the end. You go back to the old way, but it's not the old way. It's a bit like on a personal issue. If I've ever had a big row with Michelle and I thought, right, I want to leave, I just sit down and think, well, if I leave, we're never going to get back to what we had, and it's always going to be a problem. So we patch things up, and things are okay again. And I think that's the best way of doing things, and we've all experienced that. Because I know full well, if I left, you could never get that back. And things were difficult in the post-Roman period. They were difficult because there's not that trade with Europe anymore. And we'll look, and that's not a Brexit metaphor. There's not those links anymore. So what I'd like to do is actually move on. But you know what I do like is criticize reconstructions. Have you seen how wide that cart is? Is that cart actually going to really be able to get through there? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit wide.
Yes.
So anyway, let's move on. Do you know what I always go with these reconstructions? Those of you who went with me to Colchester, there was, you would have a big arch in the middle and you'd have two pedestrian accesses down the side. And it was this big arch so you could get a big thing through. That's what we're probably talking about. But anyway, moving on again. Now, where have we gone next? And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my phone. 11:34. We will go for a little bit longer. And we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to look at, we'll do Burgesswald at the end, in the second half. So the site I'm actually going to go to next is, in fact, Corinium, which is otherwise known as Cirencester. Now, anyone that loves their Roman stuff in Britain, you have to go to Cirencester because its museum is second to none when you're looking at the Romans. It's a beautiful museum. It's got mosaics in there. It's got bits of Roman column. But again, today's not a lecture looking at all of Roman civilization. It's a lecture looking at the end of Roman civilization. So let's look at this donut. This donut in itself is actually one of the 7 well-known described amphitheatres associated with Roman towns in Britain. Forget the one at Caerleon, we're talking about Roman towns at this minute. So this hasn't really been excavated. There's one excavation trench there, and there's one excavation trench there, and that's all we know about it. Now, this is where myths and legends start to come in, or facts start to come in. Now, do I go off on a tangent now? I think I do. When we look at the post-Roman period, we look at people getting back to the way things were. And we also see as well remnants of Rome in this country as well. What we do see is that former Roman legionary families who settled here would have remained here with their families, and they would have had their little bit of land. And then those people moving into the countryside would have said to the Roman legionary, actually, you know, that land that you're occupying was actually belonged to my ancestors. And, you know, that might be a little bit of friction, but what I'm trying to get at, there are other people in this country as well. There are a few Romans, probably 1% of the population. And then we come into a period of Arthur, and we come into a period of that great change, 430s, 440s, going into Germanus coming over with Vatican Roman Christianity, and not the earlier Roman Christianity, and all those other things. We get groups of people coming over, like the Angles and Saxons, but very small, in very small numbers. You get conflict between those in the north, the Pictish people, conflict with some Irish raiders, and so on, and so on. There's lots of things going on. And then you get the emergence of King Arthur. And King Arthur is a watchword for kings who resist this decay. Arth means bear, the strong bear, Arthur. If you look at the name Penarth, it means the head of the bear. But this is a period of great mythology. And if you look at something like this, you know what I'm thinking. This looks like a round table. There are lots of these. The amphitheatre at Colchester, round table. Lots of these places have great Arthurian myths, and they are associated with the decay of these cities, the mystery of the cities, and monuments like this. And lots of ways King Arthur is actually portrayed today is associated with this late Roman period. And what I'm talking about is that when you start to look at films associated with King Arthur today, they always feature them on Hadrian's Wall fighting the Picts or something. And they always feature King Arthur in Roman military uniform that was still around in the late 400s, early 500s. So what we're going to do after the break is look at a site known as Burd Oswald. And again, look at this wonderful mosaic. Lots of these are Caerleon, and lots of Roman capitals like this. So what we're going to do, we're going to set up Burd Oswald, and what I'd like to know, find out. And again, I'm excited about the York trip, as you can tell. When I go to York, I'm going to have somebody doing everything else, and I'm just going to do the Roman stuff. So there you go. So I want to know, are there any questions that anyone would like to ask? And we're just going to stop the screen sharing. Let's have those questions.
Was there evidence?
Yep.
Was there any evidence of sort of agricultural failure or something like that, or plague that might have got people to move out of the cities at that time? Do we know of in particular?
Right. If we can hold that space, right? This book here, Towns of Roman Britain. I've actually ordered this for the Llantwit Major library, right? And in this book, it discusses reasons, and it's actually a really, really good, talented book. The author is really, he goes into detail very much in connection with the collapse of Roman Britain. And he mentions that, listen to this, towns themselves degradation process, the sense of desertion and the failure of the way of life which they supported may have been caused partly by famine and partly by disease, of which the latter was probably the most deadly, and by the disintegration of an economic system of which they had been a major prop. So in other words, these cities are supported rather than self-sufficient. There are cities on the planet that are self-sufficient, but you don't find them in Britain. The more, and that's in the modern day, the more thickly an area was populated, the more quickly an infection would spread. So that towns, if affected, we're not saying that all of the ones that we're looking at today were affected by disease. I've got to be very clear on that. Would have suffered most in the earlier epidemics. On present evidence, however, there is little to show the survival of institutions or civilized way of life much beyond the latter part of the 400s. This strongly suggests that there's something major at work, but I'm saying that there's lots of things at work. If civilized life somehow survived in towns after this date, modern archaeologists have entirely failed to produce the evidence for it, presumably because if it is there, it cannot yet be recognized for what it is, i.e., instead of trading in pottery and coins, people are trading in organic objects. They're not really maintaining their buildings. But there are one or two cities that do actually survive beyond the date that we see the collapse of the Roman world in the West in 476. And one of them is Carlisle. And that's why we're going to go to Bird Oswald, which is near Carlisle. Sue, anything you'd like to say quick?
No, that was a very gentle walk.
Thank you very much. I like a gentle walk. Sorry to be a bit bombastic at the beginning. I do get like that some days. Chris, you've joined us.
Yes.
I can't even ask you any questions because you haven't heard any of it.
No.
By the way, we're doing later Roman Britain, and we're trying to focus on the after effects of the collapse of Rome in the West in 476. Jane.
Okay.
The abandonment thing, apparently the modern housing market is showing that people are now trying to move out of the cities in exactly the same way because of the pandemic.
Yes.
Especially now that people have realised some people can work from home. And apparently places, that are quite rural, like West Wales and some places in Scotland, people are rushing to buy properties, and the prices have gone right up. So it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the same thing. It is the same thing. Yes, a certain political party I'm involved with, we're going to put a stop to that. Anyway, so don't worry if you've got nice little rural retreats in the countryside. There will be yes. Anyway, let's not get away from politics. Goff, anything you'd like to say? No. Okay. Right. What we're going to do is Kathy and Karen. Right. Okay.
Are they muted?
They're muted.
Yeah. Go on.
We're going to take him to task on something, aren't we?
Go on. It's the first time we've seen you as a witch for ages. Go on, Kathy.
What you can say is he's wrong about.
Well, the only thing I disagree with your analysis of Llantwit Major side.
Right. What I'm going to ask is the other person who's got their mic on with you, if they turn it off, we can ask you to explain why. Go for it. Go on, Kathy. Why?
I can't remember.
Oh, you can't remember? It's the first time you could have said anything in weeks and you can't remember.
Oh dear.
Right, okay, then write it down and we'll come to it after the break. So what I'd like all right. What I'd like to ask is there any other takers for this walk on the 13th other than Karen?
Me.
Oh, well done. Oh my God. One more and we've got it going. And you've got to wear a face mask. Okay.
Where is the walk?
It's basically going to be a refreshing look at Llantwit Major from the ruins south of the church.
Right, I might be interested. It just depends. I'll have to check my social calendar.
Numbers are growing. We've more or less got 3, so that'll be a goer.
What time does it start? What time does it start?
It will be 1:30.
Right.
Okay. Okay then.
You'll
Well,
be providing lunch for us, Carl.
the whole point of doing 1:30 is that you'll have already eaten. Do you know what? When I'm off doing my acting, right? If you turn up at 1 o'clock, you can get a meal, right? If you turn up at 1:30, you don't. That's the way it works. So that's why we're doing 1:30. And okay, then if there's nothing, and anybody interested in the new Thursday evening thing that we'll be doing? Anyone interested in learning about aerial photography or anything? Anyway, well, you've got the details. Let me know in due course. What we'll do, we'll take a break there, and we'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Have you got an itinerary, by the way, yet worked out for York?
Yes, we do. We do have.
Get that up and.
Right. Basically, the itinerary is Transport Museum, Jorvik Viking Centre, Clifford Tower, Cathedral, York Dungeon. I will be taking people for a walk around. I'll be doing the wall walk and the towers and the shambles and various other things like that. The only way to find that Roman York is actually to stay away from the museums. I want to stay away from the museums for other reasons, but that's probably obvious.
Okay, thank you.
So that's basically what that is. Okay then, right, break. Good to have you with us, Chris. Chris, you're looking delectable as usual, and those images behind you look as if you're in a Chinese harem. Right, anyway. They do.
Sad to say, it's only my dining room.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, we'll be back. We'll speak to you soon. Now, before the break, at times I was rather excited about what I was saying, i.e. in the way the Romans, in their legacy, never really left us. But what I'd like to look at now is Burd Oswald. Now, one or two of you have actually been to the site of Burd Oswald with me. I like Burd Oswald from what the archaeology tells us. And in a way, I could be said to be presenting a very biased lecture today because I'm picking the information that seems to suit. But in my defense, when we look at the collapse of Roman civilization across Britain, and we look at the long-lasting effects of Roman civilization, it isn't, in fact, all across the board. You know, we basically see out a wipeout of Roman civilization, for example, in Cornwall and one or two other parts of Britain. In other parts of Britain, Roman civilization continues, and it continues in the northwest of our land up until, say, around 500 years AD. And we do have lots of evidence for us. On the ground, when we look at Burd Oswald, being that I've been to Burd Oswald on 2 occasions, on each occasion I've been amazed by what I'm seeing and reading. That building is a bunkhouse. It's constructed about 200 years ago, but the remains in front of us are the consecutive remains of Roman military buildings, then being replaced by Roman military buildings with timber supports and so on. What those timbers indicate there is actually showing you a hold granary, which was constructed at Burd Oswald sometime around 430 by the Roman military detachment at Burd Oswald. This is what all this information tells us. So if we show you where Burd Oswald is, which will really help, that's Burd Oswald there. And what I'm going to do is get my annotation bar. There's our Bird Oswald, and there is Carlisle. But what is also interesting is that you've got Hadrian's Wall running. That's not exactly what Hadrian's Wall looks like, but also what you've got is you've got other Roman military sites along this coastline. So it's a very militarized area, and there are roadways linking this entire landscape, and there are waterways linking the entire landscape as well. So going back to the issue of Bird Oswald, which we will do, and we move on there. And what I'm going to do is actually close my door because I've got somebody drilling outside. I'm back again. So here we go. That's the indications on the ground there would eventually come into a building like this, which is near the gateway. Now, when we look there, the gateway's indicated on that bit, and then we look at this building, which is this building here. Now, a few things about this illustration that are for me fitting with everything that I've been saying. So in about 430, there are still functioning Roman garrisons on Hadrian's Wall. That's one, that's fact, that's archaeological evidence. We know that. We got the dating evidence, we got the structural evidence. That's not just that's not just me speculating. We've got the information. From the 430s, probably running all the way up to the 500s, there's some kind of military garrison at Hadrian's Wall. Now, I've got to be very careful with the use of my language now. What do I mean by a military garrison? Right, this is an important point. Some of you interested in military side of things would be interested in this next point as well. In about the 300s, the Roman military was going through great changes. By about 350, the idea of a Roman legion had changed. By about 400, they were classed as army groups. And then all that the detachment is based at Bird Oswald is a detachment from an army group. It's not a legionary detachment. The sense of being a legionary had long since gone. So we're not talking about legionaries. We're not talking about auxiliaries. We're talking about people that wanted to defend whatever was here or were paid to be here. So defend and paid to be here are two different sentences, two different sets of understanding. Now, being that they're there on Hadrian's Wall, what the information tells us is that the Roman military there, or the, in brackets, Roman military, decided to bring their families into the locality of the fort. They brought their children and their wives into the locality of the fort. So what does that tell us? Does that tell us that this is an isolated Roman group that has decided to stay on? And were they still functioning as Romans? Well, they still fought as Romans. They still used the Roman language. They still used Roman military equipment. They still used Roman issued coinage. So we're still within the idea of Rome. So that's where we're gonna end that little paragraph. They're still in the idea of Rome. But all these people at Bird Oswald represent either local people or people that have decided to stay. And being that most of these people are local, what they're doing, they're eking out a life within the collapse of the Roman world in the West. But they're doing pretty well in the northwest of Britain. They really are. And the evidence at Carlisle tells us a completely different picture to the picture that we're seeing, for example, at Caliva Atrabatum. Carlisle is still a functioning proper city. 450, 470, 480, after Rome's collapsed in the West, after the last emperor's gone, is still functioning. And what we do see is the water courses, the water fountain at Carlisle is still operational. And why is that significant? To have a water fountain functional, the water courses are maintained. And the water courses are maintained by people who still thought in the Roman manner. And that is really important. You're looking at the guy on the horse on the left there. What we do see is evidence of various types of Roman military equipment going into the 100s, the 200s, the 300s, the 400s along the stretch of Hadrian's Wall. Roman military equipment is very different in the 400s. It doesn't function the same. And the Roman military is very much dependent upon its cavalry into the 400s. So it's less dependent upon foot soldiers and more dependent upon cavalry. Cavalry is far more effective because lots of the people on the continent are using cavalry now and not infantry to fight with. So you look out. This is also important. You look out from Hadrian's Wall, which is by here. And Kathy and I went to Hadrian's Wall when it was a wonderful dry day, very similar to the day that we've got today. Well, actually, when we got there, you were on this trip, weren't you, Keith?
Yes, what was it? Horizontal hail, wasn't it?
Yes. Can you remember, Keith? We entered the museum. That was fine. And then we went onto the site and we went over to here and it was fine. I was doing really well. I was telling you about a gateway and then we went into the field and then there was horizontal and vertical hail.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can remember we all hid by this bit of a wall. At that moment, everyone wanted to go home. We'd only actually got there at 2 o'clock on Friday. So then we went all the way around, and by the time we actually got to here, it had stopped hailing. So I was able to tell everybody about the granary. And the main thing about sort of showing you these little zigzags is that everything is still operational at that period that we're talking about, the 430s. What is also a key to what understanding this whole scenario is that up here is the damnable Scots and the Picts and all those people up north. And down here are the Knights Gentile, people who had accepted the Roman manner. However, that is all nonsense, because what we do understand that Hadrian's Wall was more of a boundary than actually a defensive boundary. So what am I talking about? When they constructed Hadrian's Wall, which is a 72-mile stone frontier, they built various forts, fortlets, mile castles and turrets. And all of these had their own function. A turret would have a few men billeted in it, looking out. A little mile castle would be a place for about 20 soldiers in a little fort. And then you'd have little fortlets, and then you'd have forts like this. So the whole scenario was seen to be defensive. However, when archaeologists excavate some of these sites, remember Bird Oswald 430, they excavate some of these sites and they find out that the fort that they're examining was abandoned in the 200s and was never occupied again. And you're thinking, well, if the fort's abandoned, how do you defend the fort if there's no one there? And then the archaeologists say that there's no evidence that the gateway in the 200s, 250s, 300s was still on. So people could just walk back and forth. And then you start to think, well, you can't defend a frontier when you can just walk through it. So therefore, this boundary takes on a different meaning. I'm going on to another subject that I don't really want to go on to, but what we do see north of Hadrian's Wall is lots of Roman villas, lots of Roman remains, and there's several forts along Hadrian's Wall that are fed with water from the north. And you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, if you're defending from the north, why is your water coming from the north? Because if you're being attacked by people in the north, all they've got to do is cut off your water supply. So what we're talking about is the meaning of Hadrian's Wall is very different. And that dynamically changes the meaning of what was happening to these people in the 430s, the 440s, and so on. The dynamics had changed. So were they using this as a defensive locality? Or were they just using this as some kind of customs center? Was this a trading post?
Mm.
And I think, if I can remember right, Keith, what they were saying at Bird Oswald was that they were looking at some of these forts remaining being used as locations used by local Roman officials that were now taking things into their own hands. So in other words, the way they were making money to keep things going was by using these as trading posts.
Yeah.
Which again changes the meaning. And you've always got to look at a changed meaning when you look at these sites. Do you know, one thing in archaeology is is saying that everything's the same. And one, Garth is going to have a right go at me at the end, but he's going to say, why did you promote your other classes, Karl? But the reason why I want to do change the other class on a Wednesday to looking at different archaeological sites across Britain is because I want to say you might be using a burial chamber in Wales as a burial chamber, but you might be using the same burial chamber in Orkney for something else. And you might be using that same structure in Cornwall for another purpose. That's why I want to do that. And what I'm trying to say is just because you've got one Roman fort on Hadrian's Wall being used for one thing, doesn't mean to say the other one's being used or the other one's being used for the same purpose. So we're going to quickly go to Carlisle, which is there. It's so close to Burd Oswald, and what you can see is it's almost as if there's a Roman state still functioning in this part of northwestern Britain, northwestern England, I should say. You know, things are very much still as they were, but with differences. So here we go. Let's carry on. So Carlisle, for reasons I'm not going to go into, but I used to have to visit Carlisle on a regular basis, and when I would visit Carlisle on a regular basis on the train, and I would be waiting to go to a meeting. I used to look around Carlisle, and there was nothing to little evidence that this had been a great Roman city. And the reason why there's no evidence to say that this has been a great Roman city is because all the evidence has been destroyed, because Carlisle was a Roman city, then it went into the early medieval period, then it went into the medieval period, then it went to the modern day and age, and everything that was Roman has either been destroyed or there's very little evidence of it surviving. Very much like York, but completely different from York, because the Roman remains in York are still in York, but civilization continues in York. York is a different situation when you look at the Romans. It's a very different situation, and I've been afraid to enter that into conversation today because it's a complicated situation. But Carlisle itself functions. Now, what I'd like to do is get my little book out now. I haven't read from this book at all in this lecture, and I should have read more from it. So I'm going to read this out as it is. It sort of conflicts with one or two other things I've said, but that doesn't matter. So here we go. Only at Carlisle is there an indication of civilized life continuing into the 600s. So we've gone way into the Roman period and beyond, and we've gone past King Arthur and all that stuff. We've gone way into it. If the still operational fountain was the result of deliberate attempts at upkeep and not a naturally continuing flow, it's clear signs that we got Roman civilization operational. Presumably, by then, the population had become partly anglicized. So in other words, are we using the word anglicized in the ecclesiastical sense or the secular sense? So in other words, it being anglicized. It started to move away from the Roman way, but this is into the 600-700s now, which is not really what we're talking about. But there is a key point here, and this is a really important point, and this ties back in with Llantwit Major. This is one of the only surviving British Christian church localities that still hold to the Roman Christian faith. And what am I talking about? Well, there are two main waves of Christianity. Well, actually, I'm going to say three. The first wave of Christianity is Roman Christianity, brought with the Romans, stayed with the Romans, continued with the Romans, like Carlisle, like bits of Cornwall, like Ireland, and like Western Wales, for example, and bits of Scotland. And there's another wave of Christianity that comes over with the likes of St. Germanus in around the late 440s, and then you look at St. Augustine coming into the 500s. You've got that other wave of Vatican Christianity coming over, which is post-Roman Empire. And then you've got another wave of Christianity, which I absolutely hate, Norman Christianity, that they rape and pillage all our monasteries, destroy all our early Christianity, and bring this evil Vatican Christianity to us. But this is really important to look at Carlisle as being something that remains all the way through. Eventually, British Christianity, Roman Christianity is destroyed and was replaced by Norman, evil Vatican Christianity that comes in by around the 1100s. Going on to this as well, Carlisle would be one of the few, if not the only town in Britain where, as in Gaul, urban traditions were kept alive by the church. So in other words, it was the church kept away, the church kept alive the old institutions. And that is, so the church kept alive the institutions that created the church. So this is why we've got the fountains and all the rest of it, and everything's still functionable in Carlisle. From the above discussion, it can be seen that the majority of towns ceased, and we've already mentioned that. They ceased by the late 400s. Isolated pockets like towns like Carlisle, with the exception of Carlisle, continue. And then in other locations, we've got a functional doubtability whether any town in other major areas actually functioned at all. And we're going to go on to one of them in a moment. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to South Wales again. We're all over the place today. We're back in South Wales. And what we're looking at now is the archaeological excavations 1956 by Leslie Alcock at Dinas Powys Hill Fort. Now, this is very interesting. And I keep using the word very interesting because this is my area. But anyway, there we're going to be looking at Dinas Powys Hill Fort. It's not an Iron Age hill fort. It's a Roman hill fort. That's difficult for me to even comprehend in my head, Jess, but it's a Roman hill fort. Or it's a Roman defended enclosure. Now, they've had more excavations here since. This is about 10 years ago. And the site that we're actually looking at is actually, if we go down there, the site is hidden in those trees. There it is. And, and the key point is as follows. That before the Romans really started to take over the landscape, the people that were associated with this landscape, the aristocracy, were living at this site at Dinas Powys. And everything was going fine. They didn't even need a defense. They had no defensive works at this site at Dinas Powys in the Iron Age. They didn't need them because actually at high water level, this entire hillock was actually surrounded by water. Yes, water did flood the landscape at Dinas Powys, and it still does today, but this was completely inundated with water. It was a bit like Avalon. It was a bit like Glastonbury. Glastonbury Tor, that little island surrounded by water, but this was very similar. Now, what happened then was as Roman civilization took root, these people, it's very likely created a Roman villa, which is much down the road at Landoc. We excavated remains of a Roman villa at Landoc, and then what we do see is a monastery at Landoc. But then as the Roman period's actually collapsing, with nobody lives, there's no evidence of anyone living here from about, I've got to be very careful with my dates because they mix, but for a long period between around 80, 90 years AD to around 350 years AD, there's nobody living here. And then suddenly people move back here. People move back to this site. Where from? I'm saying Landoc Roman Villa because that's the only one that that we know of in this area. Similarly, it's happening with the Ely Roman Villa and Cairo. So what happens is that people move back to what they know, but they also know something else, folks, and it's really important. Do you know, I keep using those intimations between the Romans taken from these people and the Britons taken from the Romans. When they move back to this site, two things happen. And the two things that happen are as follows. This site, basically, because of my new computer, I've been unable to disarticulate this to go with the aerial photography. So in other words, what we're looking at is that bit of trees there, and then this is this bit of trees, so it's the other way around. So when we go into about the 400s, what the people do who are associated with the Landmark Roman villa, they defend this site, and they actually start building structures that are very similar to Roman structures, but they have rounded corners, and they have these ditches around. They go back to building the way they had done 400 years earlier, but this time they're putting defenses into this site. So that's one point. The other point is very important. This is when we take from the Romans, folks. When they've excavated this site, they've actually found glass from Israel. They've actually found pottery from France. They found other artifacts from all the way across the Roman Empire, right? And they're still trading with what's left of the Roman world into the 500s. They're still trading with the likes of people from Byzantium. They're bringing in goods into this site. What does that mean as an archaeologist? What that means is quite straightforward. These people had been in the Roman way. They had accepted Pax Romana. But when things started to go wrong, they went back to what they knew. They went back to what they understood, as me and Jane did when we went back to our parents. They went back to what they knew. But things changed. They didn't build like they had done in the way they'd built, like the Roman villas. They hadn't built in the way anymore like they had done in the time that they were building roundhouses. But what they did, they brought an amalgam of everything in, and they still traded with the continent. That is truly a sign that we had taken what we could from the Roman world, and we went on with our lives after Roman civilization had collapsed in 476. It's like a good relationship, isn't it? Women should be aware of this. They marry a bloke. The bloke's got a really good job. He's got a house, and the woman divorces the bloke. They get their house, and they get all the money. This is the type of thing that we're talking about. Now, that was a good analogy, wasn't it, Koff? Did you know?
Naughty boy.
That was a very naughty boy, and Gillian would say that. Can I just mention something? We've got an aerial view of this landscape from 1947, actually. And the site itself is actually there. And you can just faintly see some kind of banks and ditches on this aerial view. And for those that love Dinas Powys, and you like to, if you park your car near, it's known as Lettons Way, which is, I think, here. If you park your car on Lettons Way, oh, there it is, and you go down the footpath, you can go here, you can go up the bank and see the castle of Dinas Powys, keep going along here, follow the footpath around, and you'll eventually go to some steps and you can see the hill fort. It's a beautiful walk. And if some of you want to go there from Llantwit Major and ask me nicely, we'll organise a little walk there.
Yeah, I'm in favour.
Right. Oh my God. Do you know, this is what I want. I want to get people out and about. I don't want it to be the doom and gloom of not getting out and about.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I agree fully.
Me and you, Keith, I can see it now. A nice little picnic in the ditches. Talking about ditches,
Yeah, we'd like to do that too, Carl.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
me.
Hang on, stop. This is too much. Right, okay, that's what we'll get. I tell you what, we'll do Dinas Powys in October. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. Perfect.
Yeah.
It's not going to be raining like this. Perfect. So I'm going to write down Sue, Keith, Karen, and I know Goth will go with us as well. So that's good. We've got all the gang.
And Kathy.
All right. We'll take all of you.
And me, possibly.
Oh,
And Lynn, possibly.
Oh, God.
And the dog.
And Pam.
Uncle Tom Cobley.
Yeah, a couple of chickens.
Can we get on with the lecture?
Go on, get on with it.
Oh, God, I'm stressed now. So anyway, I really appreciate that. That would be really, really nice of us to do something like that together. That just us, yeah, that'd be nice. So anyway, what we're talking about the site has become really overgrown since the 1940s. And the reason why I'm making that statement is because In time, things change quite rapidly due to Mother Nature, and it's likely by about 600 the site is abandoned again, and we don't know why. So what we're going to do now, we've got 3 sites I'd like to look at. I'm just going to check the time. We're okay for time, good. I would like to look at 3 sites. We couldn't do this lecture today without mentioning Llantwit a little bit, okay? So there is Llantwit. That's where we're going to go next. Llantwit, and we're going to. There is Llantwit. Do you know what? Right. If I never got involved with women, right, this would be my relationship, right? I love Llantwit. I've excavated at Llantwit. My first archaeological find was from a molehill at Llantwit. It's a site that I really dearly love. I love looking at its walls. But one thing that I'm very curious at is what happened to Llantwit after Roman civilization collapsed. And I'm going to be very calm in what I'm about to say. The wall around the city of Llantwit wasn't built until the AD 300s. The people of Llantwit didn't need a wall around the city. In about AD 300, the wall was built. So it's one of the most impressive city walls anywhere in Britain still standing. But the fort walls along the Norfolk coast are a little bit more impressive. But as city walls go, this is really impressive. And then I'll give you the precise date. In the year 348, what they're doing is they're building towers on the eastern and western walls. But they do not build towers on the southern and northern wall. And the conclusion is that the only reason they were building this wall around it, and the only reason why they're building the towers, is to show off. And somebody in my Arnside class on Tuesday, he jumped in there and said, I don't agree with you, Karl. I said, what do you mean? Well, they must be for defense, because the southern side actually had some kind of canal. The northern side would be very difficult terrain to attack. So if you're going to attack, you're going to attack from the east and the west. And I said, actually, you're missing the point. You're missing my point. The point I'm trying to make is that people are doing these things not because they want to do them because they want to be Roman. They're doing them to compete with other cities. So when you get into the 400s, something else interesting is happening. And when people get illustrations wrong, this next illustration will show it. Whoever did this illustration in the 1950s, I do believe it was either unaware that there was a temple in Llantwit, or somebody told them it was on the other side of the Forum and the Basilica. Because actually, the temple is actually over here. But the reconstruction of the temple is actually quite sound. So this is why I think the illustrator was told that the temple was on the other side rather than the side it was actually found. And interesting enough about this, we do believe that this site itself was actually eventually turned into an early Christian church. Now that's interesting. You know where I've completely had a go at Christian saints and stuff and all the rest of it. It's very likely that the Christian saint associated with Llantwit is actually the original Roman Christian saint known as Tathan. And this saint, yes, Tathan. And this saint itself, today you have a temple. I start again. Today you've got a church, which is more or less over here, that you can still visit today. And inside that church, they've got some nice bits of cut stone, some nice Roman masonry, and there's a nice mosaic also in the church if you ever get an opportunity to see it. And those that have been with me to Llantwit will know that I like looking in molehills. And they also know that that I like looking in grave cuts. It's when we looked at the back of the graveyard, there was a load of human limbs on the surface, and we found a few bits of Roman pottery. Unbeknown to those people that day, the reason why I disappeared afterwards, I went to the church graveyard, dug a hole and put the bones in there. because I was quite appalled to actually see the human bones on the surface. But I completely digressed. The digression has been to say that you've got the fairly modern church of Taffin there, but I do believe that that church is dedicated to the original church at Caerwent, which was on the opposite side of the Basilica and Forum area that you can still see today displayed in Caerwent itself. And you'll be surprised where we're going to go next. Does anyone know where this building is?
No.
No?
No, never seen it before in my life.
This is the well at Taft's Wells. The water at Taft's Wells within is 21 degrees C. If anyone would like a private look at this well in the winter months, we've still got the key for it, so let me know. If you actually want to see the spring and maybe get me down to the spring head to actually get you some water, I will. But that's only because I like you guys. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that in this lecture is because in 1793 or thereabouts, they actually recorded that there was Roman remains at Taft's Wells associated with this thermal spring. There are 3 thermal springs in Britain. There's one at Bath, one at Buxton, one at Taft's Wells. And the reason why I mention that, even dare to mention that in connection with the decay of Roman Britain, is that you've got a thermal spring, and surely this would be an asset to the people, whoever they were, but they abandoned the site. Like Bath, like the Roman baths, the springs at Bath were abandoned in the post-Roman period, even though the reason why the Romans the reason why the Romans put a spring at Aqua Siluri in Bath is because it's associated with the local god Sulis. They build up this huge complex there. It's associated with the local gods. It's associated with the local people. But Bath, they completely abandon it in the post-Roman period. The same thing happens at Taft's Wells. People still need to wash and they still need water, but they abandon the well. For those that don't know where Taft's Well is, there it is. And then what we do have is that we got the last time I was at Bath, I, as Keith remembers, don't you, Keith?
Well, Alan, you mean?
Yes, Alan collapsing. You had an opportunity to go around the whole thing. I didn't because I was looking after Alan.
Yes.
But yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, the point is, I wanted to come to Bath for a key reason. Thermal spring, and it was abandoned into the post-Roman period, and they make a lot in their descriptions about the abandonment of this Bath complex in the late 400s, early 500s. They make a lot of it. And what they say is that the water is constant. The thermal water comes out at 48 to 50 degrees C. And it comes into this pool, and then it floods into this main pool that you can actually see, the image that we've just looked at. And there's also something known as the Great Drain. There's, tens of thousands of gallons that spew out every day, and it just goes out into the River Avon. But then in the descriptions, they actually make a lot of saying that these buildings, by about 500, were all silted up and they were not maintained. The hypercore system was out of action. And these pools, one by one, started to fill with silt. And by eventually, they became so full of silt and so abandoned that it needed for the 1700s to come for them to actually rediscover this bathing complex. And it's very strange that such a wonderful thing is completely abandoned. And I see that people are continuing Roman civilization in bits and pieces, but this is one part of their civilization they're not continuing using. And there's no answer to that one. And so so for many generations, people look at these bathhouses. This is actually the Hackwood Folly in Kent. a rich landowner in Kent built a Roman folly in their garden made from actual Roman remains. But you can imagine wandering around Roman Britain, seeing these things and thinking, I'll start again. You're wandering around post-Roman Britain, seeing these things and you're thinking, wow, and you're just not using them anymore. But it does take a lot of effort to maintain a hypercore system. But as this is flowing water, warm flowing water, nobody cares to use it anymore. It's very strange. And then finally, as we go on to two last sites, this site itself is known as Burr Castle in Norfolk. Now, this is the only place I've ever been to that I've kept it a little bit of a mystery until the last. We parked near a local church. We went into the local church and there was this guy there. He told us all about the history of the church. And then he told us about this elusive Roman fort. And I knew what the fort looked like, but I had no idea what the fort looked like. If you know what I mean, I saw it from aerial photographs. I knew what it looked like and whatever, but I had no idea what I was just about to see. So I took everybody just down the lane and I said, everybody, we're going to look at a load of remains in a field. And I had one or two saying, I don't want to go. I don't want to see another load of Roman walls. And then when we went into the field, everybody shut up and everybody said, wow, that is absolutely amazing. A complete Roman fort intact. Look at that. Absolutely amazing. And Kathy, correct me, the seaward side, the Roman wall itself was incomplete, but on the seaward side, there was actually a harbour. So it didn't need the wall as with the rest of the site. So all of these, the three walls were completely intact. The seaward side where there was a harbour, that's something else. But the fact of the matter is it was so impressive. Everyone said, wow, I've never had that with any site that I've ever visited. And
Yes.
yes, you can remember, Kathy, yeah?
Yes. My daughter's there this week. And I told her it was worth visiting and she said, is it?
Yes, it is. It is. And tell her she needs to go and take a photograph.
Well, if it's doing this.
Anyway, thanks for that, Kathy. I'm just going to mute you again, but you can come back in a bit. So there's a point I need to make about this. This wasn't a lecture about Roman civilization. This was a lecture about the end of Roman civilization, if ever. Decline or whatever you'd like to call it. The point I'd like to make here is quite clear. You've got a fort that's perfect. It's really defensible. There would have been a ditch around it, right? There's access to the sea. So if you're under siege, if anyone's attacking you, right, you can last there forever, right? You can store water. It's perfect. You've got everything going. You can keep your family, your children, your friends and everything within the walls. But nevertheless, it was abandoned. It was completely abandoned. The reason why the walls are so intact is because they were abandoned, like most of the Saxon shore forts. Richborough, Portchester, there was a later use. Kent as well, there was a later use. But these sites were completely abandoned, never used again. And this is why the walls are so intact there. And you start to think in a different direction. The archaeologists that are saying that there was no Anglo-Saxon invasion are basing what they're saying on one important point. If you're not using these sites for defense and you live in the countryside, then there's no real threat to your life. You're not really being threatened by hordes of people. And that's a very important issue. So in other words, and the other thing as well is maintaining the buildings inside the Roman fort are going to be difficult. However, you knock most of them down, you use one or two buildings and you use the rest for agriculture. That makes sense, but they don't do that either. And then finally, we go to this site, Richborough. Now, this site at Richborough is an intriguing, important archaeological resource. And why? We started in Roman Britain in 43 AD at Richborough, and we end at Richborough. Inside Richborough, there are several Roman forts that have been built, buried, and more Roman forts being built. And then you get the final Roman fort, like the Roman fort wall at Cardiff, which is as impressive as this one. The wall at Cardiff would have been as impressive as this, and built in exactly the same way. Now, you look at this, and again, inside this was a huge monumental arch associated with Claudius. It was the entrance into Britain. It was the trading entrance into Britain. Calais over to Britain, that type of scenario. Calais to Kent, Calais to Richborough. This had its own port as well, but this site was abandoned for a short period of time and reinstated in the Norman period. But again, these beautiful walls ceased to have a function. And the questions are, and maybe the answers are quite simple. People just went back to the way they were before Rome, because that's what they felt most comfortable with. And on that note, that would be a wonderful place to end. We're going to get everybody's mics on. Kathy has the last word, but we will have her mic on at the end, if she's remembered what she wanted to say. So what I'd like to do, let's do the where-for-alls. Sue's been texting her boyfriend. So Sue, have you got anything you'd like to say?
No, there's somebody knocking on my door. I just got to go. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll see you in a minute. Keith. Keith.
No, that's fine. That's very interesting.
Janie Babes.
No, very interesting indeed. Thank you.
And you, Chris?
No, nothing, thanks, Carl.
What about you, Goffy Babes?
Yeah, very interesting. Just where is that castle in Norfolk?
I'll go back to that map and show you. We did actually show you that. So the one
Great yard.
What's it called?
It's called Burr Castle.
Burr. B-U-R-R-R.
B-U-R-G-H. B-U-R-G-H. Burr Castle.
B-U-R. Okay.
Look at the screen. It's there. Okay. So so thank you for that, Goff. Anything you'd like to say, Pam? We've got you on mic too.
Fine. Really enjoyed that.
Okay.
For a nice tour around. Thank you.
And what I'm going to say, Jim and Chris, anything you'd like to say, or Karen, before we enter Kathy?
We'll let Kathy ask all the questions.
Okay, Kathy's going to do it all. Okay, enter Kathy, go.
Calais didn't exist in 1066, let alone for the Romans. Okay, it was not there till later.
Who again?
Calais.
Oh, okay. I was just using that as an example. That's really being pedantic.
Right.
Actually, hang on a minute. I'm going to correct you on that one. If you look, there was something at Calais in the Roman period. You stand
it's probably
corrected.
a sand dune.
Right. Okay. She's winding me up now. Kathy, do your question now.
I don't see why you can't have an age of saints when Christianity was here in Roman time. And after all, we know the names of Arthur and a lot of these other ones. So why shouldn't they have existed? They would have been holy men living in a little cell somewhere and would have been fated. They weren't missionaries. Except perhaps for Istid, because obviously there's loads of churches in Brittany that are called after him.
Can I just make a humble
No,
correction?
you're not allowed to disagree. The other thing,
right, and I'll have my say then. Your last thing, Kathy.
I don't see why. What is the difference between a college, school, or university? There would have been schools in Roman London. There would definitely, the Greeks had schools, and I'm quite sure they did in Rome and other places as well.
Sorry, that's a fudged issue by me. Right, okay, I'm going to answer that. So if I mute you, right, first things first, apologies humbly. I sorry if I gave the impression that there wasn't a period of the saints. I did mention that there were saints around in there. Yeah, I would agree with you that there was a period of saints, and it was spread over a long period. So that's that one thing. And the difference between school, college, and university, well, when people go to university, they say that they're going to college. The other thing as well is, the problem is, it's depending on which source you read, they use the word school, college, monastery, what we should say is religious establishment that extended to education, and that's what we're talking about. So if anyone has got anything else to say, then they can say it now. If not, I will be seeing those of you next week. We've got the YouTube tonight at 5:30, and obviously we will plan those walks, and you'll get information about that. New newsletter coming out soon, and obviously the ghost walk tomorrow in Llantwit Major. So if there's nothing else anyone would like to say, I would like to say thank you, Karen, Kathy, Goff, Jim, Chris, Jane, Keith, Pam, and Sue, and thank you for joining me today, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and bye-bye, everybody.
Still there? Because I want her address to pick up the calendars.
Stay there, you two. Bye-bye, Goff. Bye-bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye, Daddy.
It's okay, son. Right, if she doesn't come up, bye. Do I give them the middle finger? Right, okay. So
I would like a calendar too, and I need a bit of help.
Right, hang on a minute. Are we going to do this? Right, okay.
I don't know, but I really would like a calendar.
You lot stay there. I'm going to give the witch a ring. Right, okay. I'm going to stop that thingy now. I'm going to stop that.